Okay. Here we go, chapter 5 or 15, personality and social interaction again. We've already done Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2, and now we're picking up on Roman numeral 3, where it's about manipulation. So we've talked about how personality interacts with social situations in 3 key processes: selection, evocation, and now we're going to talk about manipulation. Manipulation, defined on your PowerPoint: the various means by which people intentionally alter, change, and exploit others. You can manipulate somebody for evil, malicious intent, or you can do it for neutral or various reasons, completely not malicious. A parent could manipulate a child not to run between the cars in a parking lot. You can manipulate people at work to get work done, but people do manipulate for malicious and evil reasons as well. So this covers everything, all the different ways people manipulate and reasons people manipulate. The question that researchers were interested at the time in is, are there major organized ways that people tend to manipulate or influence others? Are we more likely to use certain tactics? And then, if that's the case, can you organize these tactics and maybe give it a name? So they gave these types of surveys like this, and they say very similar. When you want someone to do something for you, what do? Look at each of the items listed below and simply place a check next to those things that you have done to get someone to do something for you. And you just read through them. The first one's, I try to be loving when I ask. 2, I yell. 3 is, I don't respond to him or her until they do it. 4 is, I explain why I want him or her to do it. 5, I whine. 6, I act submissive. 7, I get him or her to make a commitment. Promise me you'll do this, just say you will. That's the commitment thing. 8, I hit, so it gets done. 9, I show him or her how much fun it will be. 10 is, I tell him or her that everyone else is doing it. And 11, I offer money. So they gave these surveys out to thousands of people, and they started realizing that the tactics that people use to get other people to act in certain ways, they tended to they were able to be organized. They were able to create a classification system, which is a taxonomy. So they were able to organize the ways that people manipulate others into what they call a taxonomy of tactics of manipulation. So what that big phrase means, a taxonomy is simply a classification system, and tactics of manipulation is how we manipulate others, like you just looked at that survey. So they classified the ways in which people manipulate others. So a taxonomy of tactics of manipulation is an attempt to identify and name the major ways in which people attempt to influence others in their social world. So they were able to create this. And it turns out there are about 11 tactics, overall headings of types of manipulation. And here they are. There's one called charm, trying to be loving. Coercive, I yell, coercion. Silent treatment, don't respond. Reason, I explain. Regression, I whine. Self-abasement, I act submissive. Oh, you're so smart. You're so good at this. I don't even know how to do it. Could you just help me? Your notes are better than mine. That's that self-abasement. Responsibility invocation, you get that person to make the commitment to do something. Hardball, hitting someone. Pleasure induction, show how much fun it would be. Social comparison, I tell them that everyone else is doing it. You're comparing to other people. And then the last one is offering money. So there are 11 tactics of manipulation in this taxonomy, and very interesting. So you do need to know in general what each of these means, but we're going to talk about how they're related to various sexes first of all, and then the different personality traits. So let's start with sex differences in tactics of manipulation. And this is pretty easy. There aren't any. As much as people looked at this for years and years, and some little differences start showing up. It was regression tactics. Women used them slightly more, but it just statistically wasn't significant. It didn't hold out. So really what you need to walk away with knowing is there are no sex differences. Overall, men and women are just very similar in their use of the different tactics of manipulation. Okay, now let's talk about personality predictors of tactics of manipulation. So they looked at the big five, if you notice there: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and intellect. Those are the big five personality traits. And they wanted to know that, are people with certain personality traits more likely to use some of the 11? So they spent a lot of time exploring this, and it turns out that there are some correlations. So remember, these are the 11 tactics. And let's look at how that plays out with these five, the big five. So I put the big five personality traits in yellow, and then the correlations are below them. So for example, people, when they looked at extroversion, people who are high in extroversion tended to use coercion, such as demanding, threatening, cursing, criticizing, in order to get their way. And they also used responsibility and vocation, getting others to make a commitment to their course of action. So, and this is important to remember, how these manipulation tactics are correlated with these various personality traits. So, high in extroversion tended to use coercion and responsibility and vocation. Low in extroversion used self-abasement. You're just a better note taker than mine. Could you please, help me out? I don't know how you do it, that self-abasement. So people low in extroversion use self-abasement and hardball. For hardball, they use deception, lying, even violence to get their way. Agreeableness, so number 2. People who are high in agreeableness tended to use pleasure induction and reason. Pleasure induction, they showed other people how enjoyable the activity will be. They explained the rationale. That's where reason comes in, for wanting others to engage in that behavior. Those who were low in agreeableness, the other group, they tended to use coercion and the silent treatment. So coercion, they threaten, they criticize, they yell, and they also, this group of people tended to give that silent treatment and refusing to interact until the other person would comply. And by the way, if you're low in agreeableness, you would be high in disagreeableness. So just watch the wording. I'm going to word it the way that it is here, but if you're reading your book or you're writing your notes, just watch how the wording is. Conscientiousness, the third trait. Those who were high in conscientiousness tended to use one tactic significantly more. It was reason. Conscientious people explained why they want others to do something, provided logical explanations, and explained their underlying rationale. And that kind of makes sense. Those two fit together very well. Someone who's high in conscientiousness tended to use reason to bring about behavior change in others, to manipulate others. Now, emotional stability, those who were low in emotional stability tended to use a variety of tactics, but the most common that showed up in research was regression. They pouted, they sulked, they whined, they cried until they got their way. And the last one, intellect and openness. So first of all, those who are high in intellect and openness. So high in intellect and openness, those were the smart, perceptive people. They tended to use reason most often. But they also used pleasure induction and responsibility invocation. They highlighted all the good things that will result, and they also have other people make commitments to an action, people who are high in intellect. But those who were low in intellect, they tended to use social comparison to get others to do what they wanted. They say that everyone else is doing it, and they'll look stupid or different if they don't do it that way. And I don't want to look different, and don't make me look different, because you're going to, it'll be your fault and you'll stand out. So that's the whole social comparison thing. So people low in intellect or openness tended to use social comparison significantly more often than any of the other tactics of manipulation. So in summary, what did this research tell us? It shows us that there is strong evidence that personality traits have profound implications for social interactions, which is what we're looking at in this chapter. They are related to the tactics that people use to manipulate others in their social environment. So we're looking at manipulation. All right, we have to take a minute and talk about narcissism. Your book has this really interesting section on narcissism. Narcissism, I think you probably know what a narcissist is, but it's defined on the PowerPoint: a personality dimension that involves having an inflated self-admiration, the constant attempt to draw attention to the self and keep others focused on oneself. So these people are self-absorbed, they're conceited, grandiose. They tend to lack empathy for others because they put their own needs above all else. It's hard to be empathetic when you're putting your own needs first. They tend to do things like flaunt money to impress others, and they use others for selfish ends. They tend to use other people. Someone who's narcissistic has a profound sense of entitlement. And in general, this sticks out for us when it's extreme. And we all know people who are narcissistic. But just so you know, it's kind of a continuum. Some people can be very narcissistic and some people are less narcissistic. But those people who are significantly narcissistic that would be diagnosed by a clinician as having narcissism, you notice those people. They have all of these things we're talking about. So now back to what we've been talking about, the 3 processes that we've been discussing: selection, evocation, and manipulation. They can all be documented well with this type of person. For example, for selection, narcissists choose people, so when they're selecting their environment, they choose people who admire them, who will reflect the extraordinary positive view they have of themselves, because they don't want people around that will challenge them or be better than they are. They appoint themselves to positions of power, and they avoid social situations that don't afford the chance to show off their brilliance. And they avoid things that they might not be good at. And when things don't go well for a narcissist, they tend to view themselves as a victim. It's very interesting to watch that happen. They're the first person to say, "Poor me, I can't believe this happened. It wasn't fair. Those people were against me, or that professor hates me, or everybody in my group just they didn't understand what I wanted to do with this project." So when things don't go well, they see themselves as victims. Now, as far as evocation goes, bringing things out in others, narcissists evoke predictable responses from others. Because they choose who they spend the majority of their time with carefully, they tend to split the evocations of people versus people who want to be around them and people who don't want to be around them. So first of all, they can evoke admiration or awe in some people. Some view them as brilliant and entertaining or accomplished or interesting. But in others, they also evoke anger. Others view them as selfish, incapable, boorish. And in this group of people, narcissists often evoke anger due to their grandiosity, their self-admiration, and their lack of attention for others. Okay, in terms of manipulation, they're highly exploitative of others. They exploit others often. They use others ruthlessly. They pull rank. They humiliate others, especially when they want to get other people to do something. They tend to use coercion and hardball techniques. They use anger, aggression, lying, and deceit to get what they want. Okay, you're going to read about, hopefully you already have, if not, you're going to read about a really interesting type of personality. A special person is called the Machiavellian. So you're going to read about the Machiavellian personality. The pages in your particular edition of your book, that's in your chapter outline. We're not going to talk about here because your book does a fantastic job of just kind of laying it out. So it is fair game for quizzes and tests. Know what the term means. And I just put a little note here too in the PowerPoint. In what type of environment, not fuzz, does, that's a little typo there, in what type of environments does this type of person succeed? How does this type of person select their environment, evoke responses from others, and manipulate others? That's what you need to be paying attention to when you're reading the little excerpt in your textbook about Machiavellian personality. So interesting. And by the way, there's a Machiavellian survey here. You can either type this in or you can open the PowerPoint and click on this and see where you fall on it. So when you open this up, you'll get to go through. It'll tell you a little bit about Niccolo Machiavelli. He was a real person, by the way. And then you start. So you'll go through this and answer it. And it's just for fun. It's just to kind of get you more engaged in the chapter. All right. That is chapter 15.